Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to be making an adjustable stool. Well, chances are this will be a multi-part build due to the nature of the project and how much work is needed to be done. It all starts off with milling the stock. So that's where we're going to start, by milling some maple 1.25 inches thick. We're just checking the one edge because we've jointed this one edge and we're checking it for flat. We just want to make sure that it's perfectly straight and perfectly flat, as well as perfectly square. And what we're going to do, we're going to lop this in half. We're going to laminate it together on the flat side. It doesn't really matter about this side, as long as we end up with a blank that is at least 13 by 13 by 1.25 inches thick. I think I'm going to use dowels to glue this together, and once I get it all glued in place and ready to go, we're going to clamp it up and set it aside and move on to a different part of the project. And in case you're wondering what this will be, this will end up being the seat of our stool. I'm using 3/8 dowels for this, and you can use whatever size you want. You don't even have to use dowels. If you want to use biscuits, you can use biscuits. I'm just choosing to use dowel. Basically, I've got a pretty cool doweling jig that I like, so that's the reason I chose dowels. So we're just going to get these 5 dowels set into place, and then we're going to laminate this together. One of the biggest mistakes that people make when laminating boards together is that they over tighten their clamps, and what that does is it squeezes all your glue out of your joint. So don't do that. Just give it enough pressure to pull it in tight together and let the glue soak into the wood and do its job. So we've got a good coating of glue on there. We're going to lay it on our clamps, and we're just going to get a little bit of glue here on our dowels, just like that. So we're going to use even pressure here to pull it all together, tighten the clamps equally so that everything goes together easily. And if you lined up your dowels properly, you should have no problems pulling this together. Now this is where you want to watch your squeeze out here. You'll get it to squeeze out just a little bit, but don't go crazy on it. Like I said, you don't want to squeeze out all of your glue. I may put a clamp here in the middle to hold it down just to prevent it from bowing. But other than that, we'll put this aside now and let it dry up. Don't forget that once the glue starts to cure, just get a putty knife and scrape off your excess. While we're waiting for our seat to dry up, we can move on to the next piece. And what this is a support ring for the seat that the post will insert into. And what I have is 1.25 inches thick piece of maple. And this is 7 by 7. Now, you really only need it to be roughly 5 by 5. But what we're going to do is we're going to mark the center of it. I'm going to center punch it, and we're going to drill a 5/64 inch hole right in the middle, about 1/2 inch deep. Now, that may seem like a very specific measurement, and it is, and I'll show you why, because we're going to head over to the bandsaw. Well, over here at the bandsaw, we now need to cut our seat support, and for that, we need a 5-inch diameter circle. And what better way to cut a circle than to use our circle cutting jig for the bandsaw that we built a while back on the show. So I'll post a link to this build if you'd like, and you can build your own if you wish. But we're just going to cut the 5-inch diameter circle now. We're now going to use our pivot hole as a reference, and we're going to drill 1.5 inches through hole right in the middle of our 5-inch block. We're then going to give it a good sanding all over and do a 1/4 inch round over on one of our edges. Well, now that that part is made, we need to mill some 3/4 inch stock. And what we need it for is the center supports for the post of our stool. I have 2 pieces of maple cut. They're 3/4 inch thick, and they're roughly 7 by 7, roughly. It's actually about 7 1/4. What we need to do is laminate these together to give us 1.5 inches thickness. And you may be wondering why we didn't just laminate or why we didn't just mill 1.5 inches. And it's because what I want to do is I want to strengthen this in the same way that plywood gets its strength and stability. I want to alternate the grain. So I have this piece here going this way, this piece here going 90 degrees to it. And what we're going to do is I'm going to apply some glue and we're going to clamp these together and then set it aside to dry. What is it about playing with glue that's satisfying? I don't know. Am I the only one that gets it on his fingers like this and then lets it dry and peels it off? I don't know. Takes me back to public school days, I guess. Anyway, glue it up, clamp it up, let her dry. Well, you've been following along up until now, and what do we have? We have 1.25 inch thick board that's glued up, waiting, and we have our seat ring, our seat support ring with our 1.5 inch through hole in it. That's all routed and that's waiting. And we have a 7 1/4 by 7 1/4 by 3/4 inch thick boards, 2 of them laminating together with crisscross grains for strength. And again, we're waiting. So what do we need now? Well, what we need now is some 3/4 inch stock. For this, I'm going to be using walnut. I've been using primarily maple up until now, but to throw a bit of contrast in, we're going to use walnut for these pieces. And what I need is 2 pieces that are 5 inches wide. The final dimension will have to be 15 inches long, so I'm going to give myself some wiggle room there, probably make it 16 or 17 inches long, but I need 2 of them. So 3/4 inch thick, 5 inches wide, 15, 16, 17 inches long. It's not an exact science at this point. Well, we have our 2 boards, and what we need to do is join them together. And the way that they're going to get joined together is like this, in a crisscross pattern, but we want them to only be 3/4 inch. So what we're going to do is we're going to mark out for a half lap joint, take it over to the table saw, and cut the recesses that we need to in each board in order to get them to fit like this. But before we can do that, we have a couple of layout lines that we need to do. And the first thing is that we want to mark the center of each board. Now this is pencil on walnut. So to be completely honest, I'm not even going to bother trying to film it because I know it's not going to show up. But we're going to place the center line on each one of the boards, and the final dimension of each board is going to be 3 inches wide. So we're going to mark 1.5 inches out from either side of this to mark our final dimension of each board. And then we'll do our measurements for our half lap right in the center of each board. Well, there's something to be said for double checking and verifying measurements, because I guess my eyes went wonky and I placed this mark here on this side at the wrong spot. Actually made it a 1/16 of an inch too short, so that would not have done very well. And a double check puts me exactly at 5 inches wide. So there we go. Double check your measurements, guys. In order to cut the half lap, you need to set the height of your blade at 3/8 of an inch high, which is half the thickness of the board you're working on. So both boards will get identical slots cut in them that will be 5 inches wide and 3/8 of an inch deep, and it will be centered on our board. Now, I know that there are some of you that don't have dado blades, so I'm going to do this the long way with just a regular crosscut blade in here, and we'll nibble away and get her done. Well, if you measured carefully and made your 10 kajillion cuts with that blade, you should have a nice, there we go, a nice tight fit, and it should fit together beautifully. So all I'm going to do now is we're going to glue this assembly together and then put it off to the side. Well, I have our piece of laminated maple, and we have some layout to do on this piece. So the first thing that we're going to do, I've cut it down to be 7 by 7, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mark our center line on this piece. And we will mark it on the other direction as well, which will provide us with our center mark. We then need to, from our center mark, come out 1/2 inch on each side of that center mark, and that will provide us with a 1 inch wide section on each leg. So we'll do it on this one here as well. We're now just going to lightly center punch our center of our piece. We'll now set our compass for a 3 1/4 inch radius, and we will draw our outer perimeter, which will be a 6 1/2 inch circle. Now on our center line, from the outer edge of our circle, measuring in, we're going to put a mark at 1 1/4 inch. And we're going to do this on each leg that we have here. So from the outer edge of the circle in, 1 1/4 inch. Same here, and then here. We'll just double check our measurements, and then once we get that done, we're going to draw a square line right across just in our 1 inch section. And then on this side as well. Now, truth be told, when we cut this out, this area here will be cut away. So this will be waste, as will this one and this one. Oops, not that one. This one and this one. From the outer edges of our lines that we drew here to make our 1 inch wide center part, we want to measure out from each one 3/4 of an inch and draw a line at that mark. And then the last thing we're going to do here is, using an 1 1/4 inch circle template, we're just going to round off the inside edge of this. So eventually, when this is all said and done, this section here will be waste, as will this one and this one here and this one. But until we get to that point, how do we start this? Because it's time to cut this out. So for this, we're going to head back to our circle cutting jig. But first, we're going to drill our 5/64 inch hole in the middle of this assembly. And with our circle cutting jig set to 3 1/4 for the radius, we're going to line up our piece onto our pin, and we're going to fire this up and cut our 6.5 inch diameter circle. And unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today, but I think we've made some fairly good progress in the project. There's a lot more to come on this one, guys, and we're going to get it going next week. And I hope you're going to join me for that when I bring you yet another woodworking video. Maybe we'll put our camera remote with that stool. There it is.